Hi guys, I'm actually in today's video. I'm going to be reading a revision guide for the German part of the Paper 1 GCSE history test. With this book is here for Germany from 1890 to 1945 with Herr Uncle Addy and Herr Hindenburg. Part 1. Germany and the Growth of Democracy 1819 to 1929. Kaiser Wilhelm II and the difficulties of ruling Germany 1819 to 1914. Kaiser Wilhelm II had immense power in Germany as he could appoint and dismiss the Chancellor and any of the ministers without consulting anyone else. The Kaiser had the power to suggest any new laws he wanted, and he could reject any ideas proposed by the Chancellor or ministers. The Kaiser was also head of the armed forces. However, the Kaiser had to get the approval of the Reichstag for any new laws that he proposed. The growth of parliamentary government. The German parliament, called the Reichstag, had the power to approve or reject laws proposed by the Kaiser and his ministers. This meant that the Chancellor had to get the Reichstag's support for new laws in Germany. This gave the political parties of Germany some influence over the government. This became a problem for the Kaiser when the Socialist Party, the SPD, started to grow in support after 1890. Industrial, social reform and growth of socialism. German industry, for example iron, steel, chemicals and electrical goods, was expanding very rapidly after 1890. This meant that the number of workers in the towns and cities was increasing very quickly. Living conditions in these overcrowded towns were very poor, and the workers turned towards the Socialist Party to campaign for social reform such as better housing and unemployment benefits. The SPD won more votes after 1890 and often opposed the Kaiser's government. In 1912, the SPD became the largest party in the Reichstag, and it was increasingly difficult for the Kaiser and his ministers to get laws approved by the Reichstag. The influence of Prussian militarism. Germany was created in 1871 after victories in 3 wars won by the Prussian army. As a result, the influence of the army within the politics and society of the new Germany was very strong. Many people felt strong respect and support for the army. The Kaiser had been part of the army as a young man and loved dressing up in military uniform. His policies often aimed to strengthen the German army and its influence. However, groups such as the Socialist Party resented the influence of the army, which increased the divisions between right-wing and left-wing groups in Germany. The domestic importance of the navy laws. The Kaiser wanted a navy and empire to rival those of Britain. He hoped that a strong navy and empire would increase patriotic feeling in Germany and overcome the divisions between right-wing and left-wing groups. In 1898, 1900 and 1902, laws were passed expanding the size of the German navy. This was very popular with the nationalists, the military and industrialists, but was not supported by the socialists and many workers who argued that the Kaiser's government should spend more money on social reform rather than on new battleships. The impact of the First World War. War weariness. By 1918, the German people were suffering severe hardships due to the war. Food shortages meant that many people were struggling to feed their families. For example, the winter of 1916 to 1917 was nicknamed the turnip winter, as that was all that was left for many people to eat. 600,000 women had been widowed and 2 million children were now fatherless. Wages had been suppressed during the war. Economic problems. The German economy was ravaged by the demands of war. By 1918, national income fell to a third of the 1913 level. By 1918, industrial production fell to 2/3 of the 1930 level. The Treaty of Versailles set out that Germany would have to pay reparations of £6.6 million. Germany lost important industrial areas such as Alsace-Lorraine under the Treaty of Versailles. By 1925, a third of the government income was being spent on war pensions for widows, orphans and injured soldiers. Defeat and end of the monarchy. In November 1918, the German army was being pushed back rapidly by the British and French and American forces. It was obvious that Germany had lost the war. There were protests across Germany against the Kaiser, who was blamed for taking Germany into the disastrous war and for their defeat. The Allies made it clear that they would not negotiate an armistice with the Kaiser, but only with a democratic German government. As a result, the Kaiser was forced to abdicate on November 9th and he fled to Holland. Post-war problems. The new democratic government of Germany was called the Weimar Republic. This was because the new government was set up in the small town of Weimar as the capital. Berlin was too dangerous due to the rioting. The largest party in the Reichstag was the Social Democrats, and so the first president of the Weimar Republic was the leader of the Social Democrats, Friedrich Ebert. The new government was immediately faced with serious problems due to the impact of World War I. A. The stab in the back myth. Nationalist groups in Germany, such as the National Socialist Deutsche Partei NSDAP, did not believe that the German army was losing the First World War. They believed instead that socialist politicians back in Germany had deliberately undermined the war effort so that they could get rid of the Kaiser and seize power. Thus, they claimed that the Social Democrats had stabbed the German army in the back by organising riots and protests, causing Germany to lose the war. The myth was damaging to the Weimar Republic because lots of Germans believed it was true and blamed the democratic politicians for Germany's defeat. They were nicknamed the November Criminals for signing an armistice to end the war in November 1918. B. The Treaty of Versailles. The peace treaty to end the First World War was written by Britain, France and America. The new German government was not invited. The terms of the treaty were incredibly harsh on Germany. For example, they lost 13% of their land, including 50% of its iron and steel industries. Reduction in Germany's armed forces to 100,000 men in the army, 6 battleships and no air force. Germany was blamed for starting the war and therefore forced to pay £6.6 billion in reparations. Germany's colonies were taken away and given to Britain and France. The new Weimar government had no choice but to sign the treaty because the only other option was restarting the war. Not surprisingly, the treaty was very unpopular in Germany, no surprise. The new government was blamed for signing it even though they had no choice. This gave more strength to the stab in the back myth. C. Reparations and occupation of the Ruhr. In 1922, Germany announced that it could not afford the reparation payments outlined by the Treaty of Versailles. In retaliation, French troops occupied the industrial Ruhr region of orders to take control of the mines and factories with help of the Belgians. The Weimar government decided to ask the workers to go on strike to prevent the French from getting their hands on Germany's valuable resources. This tactic was called passive resistance. This led to big problems for the Weimar Republic. The government had to support these families who went on strike, but it was not earning any money from industrial production in the Ruhr, which had stopped. This led to the next major crisis, hyperinflation. D. Hyperinflation. The government's solution to their money problems was to print more money. However, this led to a disastrous decrease in the value of the German mark. As confidence in the German currency collapsed, the mark soon became worthless. For example, $1 was worth about 200 billion marks by November 1923. As a result of the financial crisis, many families lost entire life savings and workers found out they could not afford to feed their families. Weimar democracy. Let's go change. In 1919, the new government set about the writing of a constitution for the Weimar Republic. A constitution is a set of rules stating how a country is governed. The new Weimar constitution had several strengths and weaknesses. For example, the strengths of the Weimar constitution were it was a very democratic system. All men and women over the age of 20 could vote for the representatives in the Reichstag. The people of Germany could also vote for who they wanted as a president every 7 years. There was freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and equal access for all adults. The president was head of state, but he stayed out of the running of day-to-day government. The day-to-day government was run by the chancellor, who had to get the support of the Reichstag for his new laws. Weaknesses of this new Weimar Republic were some people argue that the president had too much power. For example, Article 48 of the Constitution gave the president emergency powers to rule by decree if he thought it was necessary. This meant he could bypass the Reichstag. The chancellor was chosen by the president, not the people. The president controlled the armed forces. Some nationalists regarded the president as a Kaiser's substitute, or, a diet Kaiser. Another problem with the system of voting. The system of voting was called proportional representation. This gave parties seats in the Reichstag proportional to the percentage of votes they received. This led to the vote being split between many parties. As a result, most governments in the Weimar Republic were coalitions of several parties. These coalitions could easily collapse if the parties fell out with each other. Political unrest. The new government faced threats from extreme political groups. Some of these were communists and others were nationalists. But communists, they wanted a statement by the workers. They did not think that the Social Democrats would do enough to help working class people. So in 1919 there was the Spartacist uprising, Spartacus, whatever you call it. Workers led by Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht seized control of the government's newspapers and telegraph offices in Berlin. They were crushed by the army and the Freikorps, groups of nationalist ex-soldiers voted the communists, good reason. The two leaders were then murdered by the Freikorps. Nothing wrong with that. 1920, Red Rising in the Ruhr. 50,000 workers in the industrial Ruhr region seized control of raw material mines and factories, so no surprise, they were crushed by the army and the Freikorps, who did nothing wrong. Nationalists. They believed that the Weimar Republic was weak and unpatriotic. They believed in the stab of the back myth and wanted a single strong leader in Germany. They hated democracy and socialism and blamed the Weimar government for signing the Treaty of Versailles. In 1920, the Kapp Putsch, having put down the Ruhr uprising, the Freikorps now joined on an attempt to overthrow the Weimar government, led by Wolfgang Kapp. 12,000 Freikorps seized control of the main government building in Berlin. President Ebert appealed to the workers to go on strike to resist the Kapp Putsch. This made it possible for him to rule, and the putsch failed, unfortunately. 1923, the Munich Putsch. The NSDAP tried to seize power in Munich by using the private army, the Sturmabteilungen, SA or Brown Shirts, or Storm Division in English as a possible translation. They were supported by General Ludendorff, a well-known leader and hero of the First World War. The Weimar government then ordered the army and police to resist the NSDAP, and so they were defeated, resulting in Hitler being arrested. Consequences of the Munich Putsch. While the Munich Putsch was a failure, the consequences of the putsch were very significant. Hitler used this trial to gain a lot of publicity for his views across Germany. The judges were sympathetic to Hitler and gave him the shortest possible prison sentence, showing that senior figures within the Weimar Republic were not supportive of the new democracy. Hitler used his time in prison to write Mein Kampf, which became an important book over the next 15 years for communicating the NSDAP ideology of National Socialism. Most importantly, Hitler decided to change tactics. He realised that seizing power by force was not going to work as the army was loyal to the Weimar Republic, so instead, Hitler decided that he was going to gain power by winning votes in elections and then to destroy democracy from the inside once he became leader of Germany. This is important because this is how the NSDAP rose to power after 1929. The extent of the recovery in the Stresemann era, 1924 to 1929. Despite all of the problems that the Weimar Republic faced between 1919 and 1923, it did survive. However, urgent action was needed in 1923 to save the new government. A new chancellor was chosen in August 1923, Gustav Stresemann. He introduced several new policies that were successful in enabling the Weimar Republic to recover and survive. However, he did not totally solve the problems. Policy 1. Introduce a new currency, the Rentenmark. The success of this was that the new currency was welcomed by the German people, it solved the problem of inflation, and it solved the problem of inflation. The limitations of it were that many Germans could never forget the suffering hyperinflation and blame the Weimar Republic for this. Policy 2. He persuaded the French to leave the Ruhr by calling off passive resistance and pay reparations. Success. The French left the Ruhr and the workers went back to work, meaning the government could earn money from the industry there again. Limitations. Nationalists claimed that Stresemann had given to the French. Many Germans still felt that the reparations were unjustified, rightfully so. Policy 3. Improve relations with other countries. Success. The Lugano Treaty of 1925 said that Germany would recognise that the borders with Belgium and France set out in the Treaty of Versailles. Germany joined the League of Nations in 1926 and Stresemann was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. The Kellogg-Briand Pact of 1928 said that all countries would not use war to settle international disputes. Limitations. Nationalists said that Stresemann was weak in making agreements with Germany's enemies. Army generals argued that Germany should be taking back land by force. Rightly so. Continue to pay reparations but negotiate lower payments. Policy 4. The Dawes Plan of 1924 gave Germany longer to pay off their reparations, and the Young Plan of 1929 reduced the overall reparations bill. Limitations: many Germans still believe that they should not be paying reparations at all, rightfully so. Policy 5. Rebuild the economy with loans from the USA. Loans from America from the Dawes Plan helped pay for the hospitals, schools, and roads in Germany. Loans were also given to German businesses. American businesses set up factories in Germany. Limitations of this were that the German economy depended massively on the USA, and any problems in America would lead to huge troubles in Germany, like that would ever happen at all. Not everyone benefited. Farmers got poorer because prices stayed low. Overall, Gustav Stresemann had a lot of success in restoring stability to Germany. After 1923, there were no more attempts to overthrow the Weimar Republic. However, some of the foundations of this recovery were shaky, especially the reliance on American loans. Who would have thought? With the Wall Street crash in 1929, these weaknesses in Weimar Germany became hugely significant. Unfortunately, Stresemann died in 1929 and Germany lost its outstanding politician in the 1920s. The early years of the NSDAP, 1919 to 1928. In 1919, Hitler joins the German Workers' Party as the spying element for the army. In 1920, Hitler renames the party the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or NSDAP for short. In 1921, Hitler becomes the leader of the party, calling himself Führer, meaning leader, and then sets up the Stemmertagungsmann, SA branches, whatever. 1922, under Hitler's leadership, the party grows to have 200,000 members. In 1923, the NSDAP tries to seize power in the Munich Putsch, and Hitler is arrested and jailed. In 1924, Hitler writes Mein Kampf in Landsberg prison. The ideas in this book are: there should be one strong leader in Germany, the Führer, and the Nazi should be destroyed, the Aryans, Germans, or the master race, and all other races, especially Jews, are inferior. All German people should be united in one country. Communism is destroyed, no problem with that. And the Aryan race must conquer living space, Lebensraum, in Eastern Europe as an expat. In 1925, Hitler rules his party, which has fallen apart whilst he's in prison, introduces a new party structure and changes tactics from trying to seize power to winning votes and destroying democracy from the inside. In 1928, the NSDAP do badly in the general election, only winning 2.8% of the votes. At this stage, Gustav Stresemann has brought a recovery in Germany, and most people are not attracted by the NSDAP's extreme ideas, and they're put off by the violence of the Stemmertagungsmann. Weimar culture. The Weimar Republic was a democracy which allowed freedom of speech and expression. This new freedom was greatly accepted by many artists who began to experiment with new ideas as a result of the culture of the Weimar Republic. As a result, the culture of the Weimar Republic was modern and experimental. The National Socialists hated this because they wanted traditional German culture. Examples of Weimar culture include the Bauhaus movement in architecture. These architects wanted to design modern buildings using new materials. Their aim was to create buildings which were artistic and practical. The National Socialists hated this architecture as silly. The National Socialists hated this architecture because they thought it was silly and un-German. Bertolt Brecht and the theatre. Brecht sympathised with the Communists, who were one of the National Socialists' main political enemies. He wanted to open up culture to all people, not just the rich, so therefore he wrote the Three Penny Opera. The NSDAP hated any aspect of culture which prevented the views of another political party, for example, the Communists. Literature. One of the most famous books published in the Weimar Republic was All Quiet on the Western Front by Erich Remarque, I think. Sorry, my German's not the best. This was an anti-war book which showed the true horror of the First War and also revealed that the German army was losing in 1918, which contradicted the stab in the back myth, which was believed by many nationalists and the NSDAP and Germans overall. The NSDAP hated this book, and when it was turned into a film in 1930, they disrupted screenings of it in several German cities. The NSDAP wanted people to regard the war as glorious and to believe the stab in the back myth. Painters such as George Gross, The leading artists of the Weimar Republic painted in a modern, futuristic style. They often painted pictures to shock people, e.g. of the horrors of the First World War, or pictures which criticised the leader of Germany. The NSDAP hated these paintings as they portrayed war in a negative light, and they viewed them as unpatriotic. For example, here's one of them in the booklet. There we go. This is a famous painting by George Gross called The Pillars of Society, which criticised those elements of traditional German society which had led to the country to disaster in the First World War. For example, the army, nationalists and politicians and imperialists. It also increased the NSDAP, the character at the front, who believed in an ideology of warfare and racism, which Gross despised. Another aspect of culture in the Weimar Republic which the NSDAP hated was the nightlife. There was a massive expansion in the number of nightclubs in German cities. In many of these clubs there were cabaret acts, jazz music and dancing girls. In society, in general, there was a greater sexual freedom and homosexuality was openly tolerated. All these aspects of Weimar culture appalled Hitler and the NSDAP. It also drew criticism from the church, who thought it represented a collapse in moral standards. The communists were also against the nightclubs because it was only rich people who could afford them. Part 2. Germany and the Depression, 1929 to 1934. The Wall Street crash of 1929 and the impact of the Great Depression. In October 1929, the American stock market crashed. Thousands of US companies went bust, and this led to a collapse of world trade. Germany was particularly badly hit because the economic recovery achieved by tradesmen had relied on American loans. Who would have thought you would have seen this? So wow. These loans were now recalled. Thousands of German firms went bankrupt and millions of people lost their jobs and had to live in poverty, relying on small unemployment benefits payment to survive. Sorry, payments, not pavements, Jesus Christ, Patrick. The government was in financial trouble, and it was paying out far more in unemployment benefit and collecting less in taxes. The Great Depression had two main political effects. A. The Weimar Republic looked weak as it could not solve these problems. The strain of the Depression led to the collapse of the coalition government in 1930, when the SPD, Socialist Party of Germany, walked out as they refused to cut unemployment benefits. It appeared that democracy would not solve Germany's problem. President Hindenburg allowed the Chancellor Brüning between 1930 and 1932 to use the emergency powers of Article 48 to try to solve an economic crisis. This showed that even the leaders had little faith in democracy. Chancellor Brüning became very unpopular and was given the title the Hunger Chancellor. In order to balance the government's budget, he cut unemployment benefits and wages and raised taxes. This left ordinary Germans with less money to buy food and other essentials. B. There was increased support for extremist parties. As people became more and more desperate, they started to look for more radical solutions. Both the NSDAP and the Communists gained millions of votes between 1930 and 1932. These parties offered more extreme solutions to the Great Depression. The failure of Weimar democracy. Election results. As unemployment increased, so did the votes won by the NSDAP and the Communists. In 1928, there was about 2.1 million unemployed. In result, the NSDAP had 1 million votes and the Communists had 3 million votes. In 1930, unemployment reached 3.2 million, so the NSDAP reached 7 million votes and the Communists 5 million votes. And in July 1932, unemployment reached 6 million, so the NSDAP received 13.5 million votes and the Communists still receiving the same 5 million votes from 2 years prior. The Communists won lots of votes. The Communists won lots of support from the working class, but they could not win votes from other types of people, such as the middle class. I wonder why. The NSDAP, on the other hand, appealed to a wider range of people, the middle classes. They had lost a lot from the economic depression, and they feared that a communist government, who would have thought, would confiscate all their property to give to the workers. The NSDAP were the only party who seemed to stand up to the communists. Sounds right. Farmers, they had not benefited much from the recovery under tradesmen. The NSDAP were very active in going out of the countryside to hold meetings and win the support of Germany's farmers. Farmers also feared that the communists might seize their land and force them on to connect to farmers like in Russia. Suck a blit. Big businesses, or owners of large businesses, also feared the communists. They also liked the NSDAP's idea of rearmament, which would mean lots of business supplying equipment to the armed forces. Rich businessmen donated quite a lot of money to the NSDAP to help them in the elections. The NSDAP also did very well in elections because of their tactics. A. Hitler's leadership. Without Hitler, the NSDAP had nothing. His speeches were a major vote winner. In his speeches, he convinced many Germans that democracy was weak, that the Jude, the Jews, were to blame for Germany's problems, and that the Germans needed a single, strong leader to escape from the depression, that he would restore German pride. B. NSDAP promises. The NSDAP made sure that their election promises focused on issues that were most important to German people: to solve the economic crisis and create jobs for employed, to ignore the Treaty of Versailles and take back what was rightfully stolen from Germany, to build up the army and make Germany strong again. C. National Socialist Organisation. The National Socialists had raised a lot of money from ordinary Germans and rich businessmen. They spent this on popular measures, for example, soup kitchens for the unemployed and parades for the stereotyping, huge rallies which looked impressive, door-to-door leafleting, and public meetings. D. Propaganda. Joseph Goebbels was in charge of the National Socialist propaganda machine. He used the latest technology to get the message across: loudspeakers, films, the radio. The National Socialist election posters were also much more effective than their rivals, that being the communists. E. Combating communism. Hitler ordered the Stereotyping to disrupt Communist Party meetings. They were to beat the communists, but withdraw as soon as the police arrived. This gave the impression that the NSDAP respected law and order, but were the only party to resist communism. The role of Papen and Hindenburg and the appointment of Hitler as Chancellor. Despite all of its success the NSDAP had in the elections of 1930 and 1932, Hitler was still not Chancellor of Germany. This is because he had to be appointed by President Hindenburg. Hindenburg did not like Hitler for several reasons. He was an Austrian. He had only been a corporal in the army. He was from a poor background. His ideas were too extreme. In the elections of November 1932, the National Socialist share of the vote actually declined. To some observers, it appeared that the National Socialists had peaked and were on the way out. However, just 2 months later, Hitler was appointed as Chancellor by President Hindenburg. Interesting. This was the result of political steel struck between Hitler and Franz von Papen, leader of the Catholic Centre Party and a former Chancellor himself. July 1932. The National Socialists became the largest party in the Reichstag, but President Hindenburg appoints von Papen as Chancellor instead. November 1932. Von Papen is forced to call new elections because he cannot get the support of the Reichstag for his policies. General von Schleicher persuades Hindenburg to appoint him as Chancellor instead of von Papen, but von Schleicher cannot get enough support in the Reichstag either. January 1933. Von Papen is desperate to return to power. He approaches Hitler for a deal. Von Papen will persuade Hindenburg to appoint Hitler as Chancellor because he's good friends of the President, with von Papen as Vice Chancellor. Hindenburg agrees to von Papen's plan because there'll only be 3 National Socialists in the new cabinet. They think they can tame the tiger. What a joke. As a result, Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany in 1933. Let's get what fun this is. Overall, therefore, Hitler became Chancellor of Germany as much because of the political deal behind the scenes as for his popularity within the German people. The establishment of Hitler's dictatorship. 1933, 27th February, Reichstag fire. The Reichstag building in Berlin was destroyed by fire. Maris van der Lubbe, a Dutch communist, was found at the scene. He appeared to have been acting alone, but then the NSDAP claimed that this was the start of a communist plot to take over Germany. That night, 4,000 communists leaders were arrested by the police. The next day, Hitler persuaded Hindenburg to grant him emergency powers. This gave the police the power to arrest people and hold them for as long as they wanted without trial. Thousands of people who opposed the NSDAP were arrested. The NSDAP also banned meetings held by their political opponents and closed down their newspapers. 5th March 1933. New elections. The NSDAP used the police and the stemmer talisman to put pressure on their political opponents. More than 50 opponents of the NSDAP were killed and many more were injured. The NSDAP used radio to broadcast their anti-communist message. This helped the National Socialists achieve their best ever election result of 44% of the vote. The got dubs. 1933, 24th of March. The Enabling Law. Hitler wanted still more. He wanted an enabling law. This law would give Hitler the power to pass laws without going through the Reichstag of the President. This law would place all power in his hands. In order to achieve this, he would need to get 2/3 of the Reichstag to support it. They had to be persuaded to give up their power and hand it to Hitler. The Communist Party were banned from voting. The Centre Party were persuaded to vote in favour of the law, as Hitler promised to protect the Catholic Church. Only the Social Democrats voted against it. The enabling law was passed by 444 votes, trips, and to 94. The Weimar Republic and the democracy it brought to Germany had ended. The Reichstag had now voted itself out of existence. How ironic! Germany is now a dictator. All important decisions were made by Hitler and his closest advisors. The 2nd of May, trade unions taken over. Trade union officers were taken over and union leaders were all arrested. All trade unions were now merged into one organisation, the new German Labour Front, the Deutsche Arbeiterfront. The DAF was controlled by the National Socialists. July. All political parties banned. A law was introduced that banned people from forming new political parties. By this stage, the Social Democratic Party and the Communist Party had already been banned. Other political parties had broken up. This new law meant that no new parties could be set up to challenge the NSDAP. There was now only one party in Germany. 1934. That 29th to the 30th of June, Night of the Long Nights. By 1934, Hitler had become concerned about the increasing power of the stemmer talisman. It had over 3 million members and wanted to take control of the army. The leader of the stemmer talisman, Ernst Röhm, was a close friend of Hitler's. However, Hitler thought that Rome was a potential rival. Hitler had another reason for attacking the stemmer talisman. He needed to reassure the army. The army was smaller than the stemmer talisman, but it was well trained and disciplined. It was the only organisation that had the power to overthrow Hitler. Army leaders feared being taken over by the stemmer talisman and resented the violence they used. The army was supported by powerful businessmen who wanted Hitler to expand the army and buy new weapons. One night of the long nights, stemmer talisman leaders were dragged from their beds, taken to NSDAP headquarters and shot dead. Rome too was arrested. When he was refused to commit suicide, he was shot in prison. The night of the long nights sent a warning to the rest of Germany about how ruthless Hitler was inexpressive. Rome was also homosexual. Fun fact. 2nd of August, death of Hindenburg. When Hindenburg died, Hitler made himself president as well as chancellor. Hitler was now undisputed head of the government. 1939, August, the Army Oath. The army took an oath of personal loyalty to Hitler. Hitler was now supreme German commander of the armed forces. All German soldiers swore to obey Hitler and to risk their lives for him at any time. When Hitler became chancellor in January 1933, there were still many There are still many limits on his power. He had to get approval of the Reichstag for new laws. President Hindenburg could sack him, and he did not have control of the army. By the end of August 1934, all of these limits had been removed. The most important step was the enabling law. Using his power, Hitler abolished the trade unions and the other political parties. He also used it to command the roles of Chancellor and President on the death of Hindenburg, now calling himself the Führer of Germany. Translating to in English. Part 3. The experiences of Germany under the NSDAP. Economical changes. Benefits and drawbacks. The working class. Positives. The NSDAP created millions of new jobs, particularly in public work schemes such as building autobahns, schools and hospitals. By 1936, the average worker was earning 35 marks a week, which was 10 times the level of an employment benefit from before 1933. The National Socialists set up the Centrifuge Joy, the KDF, run by Dr. Robert Lay, which organised sporting, leisure and cultural events for the workers. It also offered affordable holidays. The German Labour Front, the Deutsche Arbeiterfront, organised some improvements to working conditions, such as better lunches, safer conditions and new toilets. Nice. The NSDAP propaganda continually celebrated the work as one of the most important laws in strengthening Germany. The NSDAP passed a new law which meant that bosses could not sack workers on the spot. Why is there so many Spanish listeners? Negatives. The work in the Reich Labour Service was very dreary. Workers were only paid pocket money, they were forced to live away from their families in barracks, and they were disciplined more like soldiers. The work, for example, on autobahns was heavy manual labour. All men aged 18 to 25 had to do 6 months service in the RAD, or RAD. Places on the best Centrifuge Joy cruisers were reserved for National Socialist Party members. Also, the NSDAP did not deliver a single Volkswagen car despite encouraging workers to pay their money in a scheme to save up for one. Instead, the factory started to make tanks instead. Pretty cool. The NSDAP abolished all trade unions and replaced them with the Deutsche Arbeiterfront. As a result, wages did not increase very much, but workers' hours went up a lot, strikes were made illegal, and people who refused a job were called work shy and sent to a camp. A concentration camp, of course. The middle class. Middle class people were some of the most enthusiastic supporters of the NSDAP. Many of them were grateful to NSDAP for preventing a communist revolution in Germany. They also benefited from the NSDAP's economical policies, which brought them about a recovery in Germany soon after 1933. This meant that businesses were doing well again. Rich industrialists. Rich factory owners and manufacturers were very supportive of the NSDAP's policies. They made a lot of money supplying equipment to the armed forces, the Wehrmacht, which were expanding rapidly after 1933. The National Socialists needed the support of these people, so they made every effort not to annoy them. For example, the NSDAP suppressed workers' wages and lengthened their hours through the German Labour Front, Deutsche Arbeiterfront, farmers. The National Socialists viewed farmers as a foundation for a successful and stronger nation. Therefore, they introduced policies designed to help Germany's farmers. Farmers' debts were cancelled and the price of their goods was increased so that they made more money. A lot of National Socialist propaganda hailed the Aryan farmer as the ideal of Germany. The National Socialists encouraged girls and women to wear their hair in pigtails, the traditional peasant style. Not surprisingly, many farmers supported the National Socialists in the 1930s. Employment. The figure for employment in National Socialist Germany are impressive, as in 1933 there was 6 million employed. In 1934 this decreased to 3.7 million. In 1935 this decreased to 2.9 million. 1936 decreased to 2.5 million. 1937 it increased to 1.8 million. To 1938 it decreased to 1.1 million. To 1939 where it decreased to 0.3 million, almost virtually non-existent. This apparent success in reducing employment was down to two main factors: creating new jobs and creating accounting. For example, adjusting the figures. Creating new jobs. The NSDAP crafted thousands of new jobs in the Reich Labour Service, building autobahns, schools and hospitals, planting forests and digging drainage ditches on farms.